This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world-famous Comedy Cellar, come at you on Sirius XM 99, Raw Dog, and wherever you get your podcasts. Dan Letterman here, coming at you from our studio in New York's historic Greenwich Village. I am all by myself because, well, I'm with Nicole Lyons, our sound person, but as far as the other hosts, they are coming via remote. Noam from his summer residence in Wells, Maine, and Periel from her, I guess, cousin's house or wherever she is in Bat Yam, Israel.
No, and I'm not in Bat Yam, but that's fine.
Okay.
Isn't that the Staten Island of Israel?
I think it's more of like the Jersey Shore.
Either way, Periel's ashamed of her.
But that's not where I am. First of all, they're not my roots. And second of all, I'm not ashamed of it, but it's also not where I am.
We have Nick Griffin joining us in a little bit to discuss his new special. And also we have a discussion with Dr. Richard Heyer, who has written about the neuroscience of intelligence. And we'll talk about, I guess, IQ and
now
environment, and sort of probably be a little controversial, and who knows, we might get some backlash. But in any case, yeah, go ahead. No,
did we ask him to speak slowly?
Who, me?
Because Periel is in Israel.
You're really treading on thin ice. Really thin ice.
I don't know what kind of good connection you have. I just want to speak slowly so you can understand him.
Okay, well, you can tell him that. You can tell him that, and we'll see.
No, I want to thank Noam Dorman for hosting me at his house.
Publicly. He's publicly thanking me. Go ahead.
Publicly thanking Noam. I don't think it's the first time, but it is the first time that I spent a couple of days at his summer residence in Maine. He invited me up there, and I went for 2 days. And when I arrived, I took out my wallet, I put it on the table in my bedroom that he gave me, with neither the intention nor the need to touch it for 2 days. Noam paid for everything, and I thank you for that. There was lobster, there was steak.
Oh, can you start again? Can you say that again?
I said I want to thank you for not.
You took your wallet and what?
I took my wallet out when I arrived at your house. I put it on the table with no intention of picking it up for the next 2 days. Thankfully, what's that, Noam?
What kind of person does such a thing?
Well, I assumed that you would pay for everything. Of course, if you didn't, I was prepared to pick it up. But I had anticipated a full treating, and that's what I got.
Oh my God, that's the last time you call. You're out. You're out, Dan.
Well, I just say
why would you assume such a thing?
Because Noam generally pays for shit when I am in his presence. So I figured. I figured that's what would happen. And sort of now, had he not done so, I would have picked up my wallet, and used it. But I didn't anticipate that because I know how Noam is.
But isn't it sort of the thing that when somebody invites you to go
yeah, go ahead.
Isn't sort of the thing that when somebody invites you to go someplace that generally the person invited would like pick up a meal or several meals as a gesture of thanks for that invitation?
That may be the case in general, but when the income disparity is sufficiently vast, I'm not so sure. Please let me know if I'm wrong. And I also know how Noam is.
You're wrong.
But maybe I could have gotten a bottle of wine. Fair enough. And if I'm invited back, I will do so, or some dessert or something of that nature. But in any case,
I'm telling you, you're wrong. It has nothing to do with
Well, when you've been to Maine, what did you pay for when you got there?
I'm speechless.
I don't know. I don't recall, but I can say that certainly, regardless of Maine or any place else, if I'm ever invited someplace,
that wasn't the question.
certainly
the question
do
is, what did you pay for when you were in Maine?
I really don't remember, but I'm telling you that you said, tell me if I'm wrong. And I'm telling you that you're wrong.
I might be wrong in the general case. Nick, just to keep you out there, we're here with Nick Griffin. He just arrived. Nick, I went to Noam's house in Maine for 2 days, in Wells, Maine. And I mentioned that I didn't anticipate spending any money when I got there. I spent money getting there, more than I had anticipated, but that's not Noam's issue. Rental cars are expensive, Nick. But in any case, I should have flown, but by the time
You rented a car from here?
yes.
Oh, that's got to be a
Now I could have taken a plane, but by the time I did everything last minute. So by that time the flights were just as expensive. And I figured, have some freedom, and I don't drive very often, so I kind of enjoy it. But so I'm saying that when I got there, I put my wallet away and didn't anticipate using it, nor did I offer. And Perry was outraged, and Noam may or may not be outraged, or maybe feigning outrage. I don't know, but Noam, I know how Noam is, and I also understand that Noam is he's the big kahuna here. So do you think
that has nothing to do with anything? It doesn't matter. That's not how you measure these things. You're supposed to be you're supposed to be reciprocal.
When you were in Maine is the question I asked you. This is the 3rd time. Do you recall anything that you paid for when you were there? And by the way, you come with your husband and son. It's an even bigger imposition. Nick, you have anything to say?
Well, I was going to say I probably would have, just as a
I should have gotten a coffee cake.
Gratuitous gesture, picked up maybe one dinner.
One dinner that would have been.
There you go.
There was 9 people up there.
Well, I know, but
that one dinner would have cost you about $500.
These are the things we have to do as adults.
Well, I guess I felt like a kid when I was up there. I felt like Noam was daddy and I was a kid, and I thought it was rather an enjoyable experience. Noam took us to the water park. By the way, he dropped $5 because he took the whole crew. Noted Noam, noted and grateful. Does that count for anything?
It does count. It counts for a lot.
I went on the water slides and the roller coaster, and it was.
Oh my God! Can I tell you something?
Go ahead.
It's not too late, Dan. You can send a thank you.
Oh no, it's too late. No, it's too late. It's too late.
Well, I sent a very nice text when I left.
Yes.
Saying that I thank you, and if you'll have me back again, I will bring an assortment.
So listen, what Dan is touching on a very interesting issue here, and I experienced this on both sides, because I was invited on a yacht cruise in July by a man whose the disparity of my income to his probably exceeds Dan's income to mine. I'd say it certainly does. And of course, and he likes to pay for everything, blah blah blah. And I like I think are happy to pay for everything. It's not even like, it's not an issue. On the other hand, when someone expresses it in Dan's words, it's like, oh, I guess, yeah. So that's the way they think. So, all I could say is that, on the one hand, I would like to pay for everything because you're my guests. On the other hand, if it was my kids and I was sending them on a trip, I would tell them, you better not fucking let him pay for everything. I mean, you better, you pay for something. Don't, because that's what you're supposed, you have to be a mensch. So I would never want to raise, I mean, speaking frankly, I would never want to hear my son Manny on a podcast expressing what is the truth. Dan's just telling the truth, but like I can't fault him for the truth. He knows the score. I get it. On the other hand, there's a certain diplomacy of everything that certain things you just don't say out loud. I don't know, Dan. It's like,
well, but I also I also know you, and I know that you typically pay for shit. So
I know.
So that's another factor.
Well, I mean, since we're talking about it, so Periel, these motherfuckers. First, let me tell you what it extended to, Periel. We went to the movies. We went to the movies.
Well,
I paid for everybody.
I didn't go to the movies.
Oh, you didn't go to the movies. We go to ice cream. I pay for everybody. Like even the smallest amounts of like somebody can say, no, we're getting like 3 scoops of ice cream. No, I got this. Nope. No, just sit there and let daddy pay for the ice cream.
But was I the only one that let you pay?
No.
Okay,
No.
so
Okay, but I'm here to tell you that
So,
perhaps
Periel,
perhaps
it's so funny, and of course, you know, it's one might, if they were, insufficiently politically correct, draw conclusions. I don't know. I don't know what to say, but I know Nick is thinking Jews. I know that's what he's thinking. Don't lie, Nick. So go ahead.
well, but there's Jews on both sides of this equation. There's the Jew that wouldn't pay for anything, and the Jew that paid for everything. So it's kind of a wash.
I'm the exception that proves the rule.
No, but I'm here to really set the record straight, having been on the receiving end of both Noam's generosity and other friends of mine who are also very generous and very wealthy. And I mean, perhaps Dan really doesn't know, and so I'm here to share the information that it's really not a question ever of somebody's wealth. The point is that there should be some reciprocity. You never want to let a host pay for everything. It's just in poor taste, if you will.
Well, noted, but I said I will bring an assortment next time if there is a next time. I do want to talk to. Yeah, go ahead.
So I just because I did notice it. So it's true. It's not. It makes no sense for Dan to pick up a meal or whatever, because not only is it 9 people, but it's 9 people somebody doesn't even know this. These are not his guests. It's
okay.
Beyond.
It doesn't have to be a meal. It doesn't have to be a meal. I'm not saying that.
But I did notice, and it's true, Dan was in there, that when extended to the movies. So for instance, I just imagine that if I had been Dan wasn't at the movie, if I had been in the shoes of some of the other people, I'd say, oh, it's 3 of us. We're going to the movies. This is my chance to kind of make an affordable gesture of $40 or whatever it was. It was, this is, but nope, they all just sat there. What do you want? What do you want for popcorn? I want a popcorn. I want a Diet Coke. Nobody paid for a fucking
But let the record show I wasn't at them. These were other people.
You wouldn't have paid if you had been.
No, I wouldn't have. But I would have, and I would have gotten extra large popcorn with jujube.
Very, very poor taste. That's all I have to say.
And I know some people say it's not the money, but I think you all know me well enough. Really, I couldn't care less. As a matter of fact, it's worth every penny to have this story. This story is well worth the $50 it cost me. But the fact is, I see something of how money corrupts people, and it infects their character in a way which is not good, and I do think that at some point, I won't speak for Dan, but to feel like a man, you got to step up sometimes, otherwise you feel.
What about a woman? Why can't you feel like a woman? Why does it have to be a man?
You're right, but nevertheless, I stand by my old-fashioned thing. That
if I came by myself, I wouldn't want you guys to pay for everything all the time.
No, I know you and your husband are not like that at all. I know that.
In any
I'm
case,
saying even if I came by myself, though.
I know. I get that. I understand, and I will endorse that as absolutely true. I know you.
Apparently, if we go up at the same time, we can split a bottle of Chianti. Okay, Nick Griffin is with us. Nick is a Comedy Cellar regular. He has been for some time. He's a veteran like myself, and he's got a special out. He put it on YouTube, which is how it's done nowadays. Nick, please tell us, if you would, about your special.
Well, I taped it at the lovely Fat Black Pussycat Bar about 10 months ago, and fiddled with it a little bit and had it edited and sat on it for a few minutes. and then I just put it out like a week ago. So I'm excited and grateful that the lovely Fat Black Pussycat Comedy Cellar, kind of umbrella allowed me to do it there. It was cool, and I like it now. I hated it when I first saw it, and now I watched about 10 minutes of it today, and I liked it. So
What's it called?
absolutely wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is
How much time did you put into coming up with the name? Because I spent
not
not
a minute, not even at all. Really. I don't even think I had a second idea. I didn't even think this one was great, but I didn't think it mattered.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed on this podcast my special, which we call it. It ended up being a little bit bananas. That was Perry L's suggestion,
Is that what
referencing
you
my
ended up with
referencing
it?
my banana joke and the fact that I'm a little bit bananas. But part of me was like, yeah, all right. I mean, obviously you want to have a good name, but I don't know how much
I don't
it
think it
matters
matters,
really
no.
at the end of the day. I guess it arguably it's good for the algorithm if somebody's searching shit. I don't know.
I would guess that if you took all the energy that it takes to think, in days that thinks to take up to come up with an idea and put it into marketing, it would have probably be more valuable to just market it, like put more money into the algorithm person and the promotion person. Like that's all it is anymore. It's just you got to get people to get eyes on it. And I can't imagine a name turning somebody off. I mean, obviously there's certain words that would.
But there's certain words that might pop up in a search.
Yeah.
Is the thing. So your hope is, I guess, what everybody's hope with a special is that 3 million people watch it, and then you can go on the road and people will come.
Sure, yeah, that would be wonderful. That's I've been doing it for so long, and I have been late to the game in terms of marketing and trying to accumulate followers, and I poo-pooed the whole just every aspect of social media. I didn't think it was going to last or work or be something, and it ended up being huge and or being really the most important thing at this point.
Well, when
to a
Dane Cook
career.
when Dane
Yeah,
Cook when Dane
man,
Cook
I didn't
became
know.
huge from MySpace, that should have clued us in
I know, I did.
that
That's how
social
dumb I
media is
was.
important. But I'm with you. Even after Dane Cook, I'm like, who cares about posting shit on Instagram?
Right, I didn't.
You know.
It's just basic marketing, and I didn't. It didn't soak in. So, but again, the special's real good, and I'm glad I did it, and I've gotten some nice people to recommend it and stuff on Instagram, so it's good.
Do you think having a special with a particular theme is nowadays is good? Even if your whole special doesn't talk about it, like Gary Gulman, The Great Depression. Okay, it wasn't every joke, but it was a lot of it was about depression.
Right.
You know, Mulaney
Certainly
was
Colin
mostly
Quinn does
about
that, I think.
right. Mulaney's was mostly about rehab and drug addiction.
Right.
I don't know. Any thoughts, Noam, about a thematic? Mine is just jokes, and no two jokes go in the same direction.
Right.
As yours, would you say that?
Basically, yeah, I have 3 or 4 jokes on a subject, then I move on, and
So I don't know. Noam, do you think from a marketing standpoint, or from a fame standpoint, or these comics that hit a particular theme
issue?
Well, when we were at the ice cream place, Dan, did it even occur to you maybe?
Well, my next special will be called Cheap Jew. But
I'm sorry. What were we talking about?
No, we're talking about.
I'm just thinking about the dilemma I'm in now. Okay, so
To be honest with you, it didn't occur to me to pay for my peach ice cream, which was delicious.
Yeah. So anyway, do I think it's good to have a theme? I think that it's good to be funny as hell. And with Gary's thing, it was more than a theme. It was something extremely unusual, delve into mental illness. And he didn't just make jokes about it. He actually also had not non-funny insights into it, which were actually, to me, more compelling than the stand-up material. Not that I'm his biggest fan, but I mean, in terms of like setting it apart from other things that you might go for your stand-up watching time. That's what really made it riveting. Similarly with something that didn't get as much attention, but I think is equally good, Al Lubell's Mentally Al, is that what it's called?
Well, that's a documentary, not a special, but yeah.
Well, Gary's thing is like a documentary, isn't it?
I don't know. It's
Oh, yeah,
mostly
yeah.
stand-up.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
didn't,
yeah,
you,
yeah.
you didn't watch it?
Whether I watched it or not is not the point. The point is it was stand-up.
What kind of fucking friend are you? You leech off me. You don't watch your friend's specials. How do you live with yourself then, Adderman?
I'm a flawed individual. I'm
making adjustments, and,
and I'm doing my best, and I'm trying to improve where I can. And but in any
You
case,
watched Gary's special, and you had the nerve to bring it up, and then
I
try
know
to
what
bluff
it's.
your
I know
way
what it's
through.
about.
Well, it
I
was
know
a
what
special.
I know what it's about, and it was a special. It wasn't a documentary. That I know.
I think that it's totally fair to say that it had documentary aspects to it.
But no,
I remember it as a documentary.
No, it was a comedy special, but it was not a
Right. It
Well,
had
so was
nothing
Al
special.
LaBelle's. So was Al LaBelle's.
comedy special by any stretch of the imagination. Right. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah,
I think, like Noam was saying earlier, I think Al's story was so compelling that it and watching him and looking at him and seeing how he maneuvers through the world was, I would have watched it if he was a mechanic or something. It was, but I've known and loved Al for years. So,
well, I
my
will
kid.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said my kids were captivated by Al LaBelle's special. Right. My son Manny still remembers some of the jokes.
But I mean, there was stand-up in it, but 90% of it was not stand-up. So was not jokes.
I guess. So I remember them having, the hazy memory that we can ask our next guest about. I remember them as being quite similar in terms of the overall way they impacted you. You definitely heard a lot of Al's material. You heard a lot of Gary's material, but the really interesting thing about them was to see the people behind them and how unique their stories were and how they were combating and trying to overcome these.
Right.
These I don't want to call it mental illness or whatever it is, but they're neurological novelties.
Well, I meant there's nothing wrong with.
Why don't you want to call it mental illness?
Well, you could say
okay, our next guest will be joining us.
Okay.
On a related note, Keith Robinson also has a special coming out on Netflix. I'm not sure when it's going to. I hate to say the word drop because it just doesn't feel like it's me. So I'll say I don't know when it's coming out.
Too beatniky.
It just seems drop is just like hip hoppy or it's too young. It's too cool. When it's going to appear on Netflix, I don't know. But Keith Robinson, who suffered a stroke and had to deal with that, I find him riveting when he performs here, and I go and I watch him, and I don't watch many people.
Dan, maybe you should introduce Richard. He's there waiting, and then maybe you can. Well, though it wasn't really on the list, maybe you should ask him any questions about Keith Robinson, who had a stroke, because this is right up this man's alley, I believe. So, yeah.
Okay, I mean, sure. But anyway, Richard Heyer is with us. He's a Professor Emeritus in Pediatric Neurology of the UC Irvine School of Medicine, and has a PhD from Johns Hopkins, and he is the editor-in-chief of the journal Intelligence. And we are lucky to have him with us. Richard Heyer, how do you do? Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, guys. Good to be here.
And
it sounds great.
Hi.
Yes, and thankfully we have a good connection. Richard, just to give you some introductions, I'm here. I'm Dan Natterman. I'm a comic. Noam Dorman is the owner of the Comedy Cellar Comedy Club. Periel Ashenbrand is a friend of ours and a comic. And Nick Griffin is a comic, and he's here in studio. So now you know who everybody is, and let the games begin. Noam, I assume you have.
So do you want to bring up? Well, I have stuff to ask, but just because you brought up Keith, do you have any? We have a comedian, Keith Robinson, who had 2 strokes, and you'll be interested. He just got a Netflix special, and he's impaired. He slurs his words a bit, and he limps. He has weakness in one side of his body, but mentally he seems exactly the same as he ever was. How is it that you can so often have a stroke like that? And it pinpoints various things, but somehow doesn't affect your intelligence, or seems to.
Well, first of all, I'm glad to be here.
Oh, welcome.
When you originally contacted me, I thought, this is the most unusual invitation I've had. Comedy Cellar. but I didn't have a set prepared, so I was thinking, man, this is going to be tough. So the first question you asked, I have to tell you, I'm not a clinician and I'm not an MD. So I don't have any experience at all with stroke patients. What I do know in general, the answer to your question is, first of all, depending on how old he is, he has a pretty good chance of recovering full mental function, depending on where the stroke was, how big an area of brain damage there was. And it is the case that strokes and other kinds of brain damage can damage one part of the brain that is not that relevant for some other mental abilities. So speech is a complex mental activity. There are a couple areas in the brain that are extremely important for speech. With time, damage to those areas, with time, the brain either heals those areas or the surrounding tissue takes over the function of those areas. And that's really kind of a compensatory mechanism the brain has. So I don't know this particular case. A critical variable is how old a person he is.
All right, so just a shot in the dark. So, okay, the reason I am enthralled by you and happy to have you here is because I'm always focused on the issue of intelligence. First of all, I have 3 young children, and I desperately want to do whatever I can to give them the ability to achieve their full potential, is the way I see it. Their full potential in terms of their intelligence and their intellectual function. I'm not one who believes I can get them smarter than they were born, but I think that some people never figure out how to be as smart as they can be. So what is your general feeling about it? Is our IQ something we're born with and there's nothing we can do about it?
Well, the short answer is yes. The longer answer,
I told you.
The longer answer is more interesting. And the longer answer is really is based on what we understand intelligence is. And some people have a simple definition that intelligence is just the opposite of stupidity. And we know it when we see it. Other people think slightly more sophisticated that intelligence is individual differences in learning and memory, because some people learn faster and better than other people, and some people have a much better memory and can memorize more things quicker than other people. So why is that? Both of those things are related to intelligence, learning and memory. People who do research on intelligence have a more technical definition, but it's a common sense definition. The definition that most researchers use is that intelligence is a very general mental ability that is common to all mental abilities. So intelligence really is this general ability called the G factor, or G. And it comes from the empirical observation that all tests of mental ability are positively correlated with each other. So that if you do well on one test, you tend to do well on all tests of mental ability. And the G factor can be estimated in people irrespective of the content of the test. So it's not just verbal. It's not just numbers. It's not just spelling. It's not just analogies. It's what's common to all those mental abilities. So it's a general ability. Does that make sense? It's general reasoning ability.
It does make sense. And I my own personal feeling. Well, before I tell you my personal feeling about it, how does that jibe with the idea that some people can have very, very specific abilities. Like, for instance, I learned that Gary Kasparov, the chess player, has an IQ of like 135. I read that somewhere. Now, 135 is a very high IQ, but you wouldn't think that would be the IQ of the greatest chess player in the world, right? So so it's apparent that he has some pinpointed ability, and pinpointed abilities obviously exist in all sorts of things. How does that account? How do you account for that?
Yes, people everyone has a different pattern of mental ability, strengths, and weaknesses. So I'm a terrible speller, but I can do
Me
numbers
too.
well. And doing numbers well, not that so important in everyday life anymore because we have calculators. Being a bad speller now has become irrelevant to me because I have word check and word processing. But there are different patterns of cognitive strengths and weaknesses. And grandmaster chess players are an interesting example because they tend to have higher than average IQs, but they're not kind of the mental geniuses you might imagine. 135 IQ is around the top 1% of the population. So that's pretty smart. But we see this thing you're talking about of being very good in some mental abilities and not so good in others when we talk about savants. So, a savant is someone with an extraordinary mental ability who can read a book by just flipping the pages like this, scanning next page, and then remember everything. We've had some, they're very rare, but there are some fairly recent examples of people who can do this. Yet this particular person that I'm thinking of, his IQ was so low, he could not take care of himself. And his father
Jesus Christ
devoted his life to taking him around and being sure he was okay. He actually performed in front of audiences where the audience would call out questions like, who was Henry VIII's fourth wife? Where was she born? And when did she die? And he could immediately tell you the answer to that question because he had read a whole bunch of historical books and almanacs and things like that. So there was an example of someone with an extraordinarily but narrow mental ability, but very little of the G factor.
Yeah, I read somewhere that people.
So memory. Yeah.
So I read somewhere that there are a certain number of people that are extremely gifted with language learning that inevitably aren't that smart. And that kind of makes sense because children are great language learners and they're not that smart, but yet the dumbest American can learn English, or the dumbest person in any country learns their native language quickly and well, and veritable geniuses at language learning.
At language learning, that's right. And there are complicated brain maturation things in early life that account for that. So yeah, we know that separate mental abilities exist, but they're not completely separate. They are related. So people who are, whereas, as you say, everyone essentially learns to speak their native language, some people become novelists and are very verbally gifted, and other people can't do that with language. So there are vast individual differences in language ability within a population of native speakers.
All right. Now let me tell you what my life experience has been. I was always very smart. I always did very well in school. But as I got older and I became more distracted, I can remember being young and just being able to totally focus on whatever it was in school. By the time I got to college and I had to take the LSATs, I had a lot of trouble. And I took a practice LSAT and I just could not focus. And I just walked out. I said, whatever, que sera, sera, I'm going to take it. And then, but when I went into the actual test, for some reason, and I can remember to this day, and I've spoken about it, time slowed down. I had absolute focus. And I can remember, I remember the problems, some of the problems I had to this day. and I got virtually everything right. I got a very, very high score. I could have never gotten that score if it was not under actual test conditions. And so I became open to the idea that some aspect of intelligence, in my mind, is a batting average, in the sense that some people can get the same task right over and over and over. They seem to be impervious to any kind of stress or anything like that. And other people, they have the ability to get these things right, but they can't get them right as predictably, because for whatever reason, I suffer that way. They can't always get in the right headspace to think about it like a computer with your Control Alt Delete and all the processes going. For some reason, there's always a lot of bandwidth going on with me, and I can't seem to devote it, except in certain moments. I can't devote the full bandwidth that I'm capable of to the problem at hand. And I've noticed that some people don't have that issue. I don't think they're smarter than I am. I might even think I'm smarter than they are, because I know, like, when I'm in the shower and I'm thinking clearly, I will exceed their ability. But I can't get my mind on track a lot of the time. Is that any comments on that?
Yes, what you're describing is the difficulty of measuring the G factor. There is no direct measure of the G factor. It's estimated. And an IQ test turns out to be a good estimate of the G factor, because a standard IQ test has subtests from different mental abilities that are all combined into one number, one IQ score. But an IQ score is not the same as the G factor. Any standardized test like the LSAT or the SAT is an estimate of the G factor, because they all involve reasoning, the different kinds of reasoning. And under some circumstances, you might be reasoning better today than yesterday. So, for example, if you take an IQ test when you have the flu and 102 temperature, you get a score. A month later, you take another IQ test and you get a different score that's better. Clearly, the second time you took the test, that score is a better estimate, a more valid estimate. And that's why for students are allowed to take the SAT multiple times, and universities usually only count the best score. Does that make sense?
Now, yeah, it makes sense. I just and by the way, do SAT scores go up with people take Adderall like this? Has that been measured?
There's not good research on that. You know, if Adderall or another drug helps you pay attention a little bit more, then you're paying attention more, and maybe your score might go up because you can finish 1 or 2 or 3 more items in the time allotted because you're working a little faster. It doesn't necessarily make you more accurate, though. It doesn't make you smarter.
Now, doesn't make you smart. Now, what about things like talents, like comedy? Like, you're here, these two guys here. These are Ed Periel. These are some of the really the most gifted comic minds. They're smart guys. I don't think they're super geniuses. I don't think any of this are. But isn't, like, what distinguishes talent from G factor?
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, they're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. And talents are more specific, but they're not unrelated to the G factor. So think of all the comedians that you know. You could probably, at least in your head, rank order them in terms of how smart you think they are. And
I do that all the time.
Probably none of them, I don't think you'd say any of them are dumb, because it takes a certain amount of intelligence to have insight into the human condition, which is often the source of humor. It takes intelligence to verbally craft a joke. I've tried to make up jokes. It's not an easy activity.
Well, can I interject? Because this is my field. First of all, you'd be surprised. I'm not saying comedians, they're dumb comedians, but there are comedians that whose level of intelligence is probably unimpressive.
Do you want to say who?
No, of course I don't. But I do, as far as writing jokes, I think there probably is a correlation between IQ and writing good jokes. There's some comedians that are known as good joke writers. I happen to be one of them. Nick Griffin happens to be one of them. Periel is still getting she's still getting her feet wet in the business, but we'll see where that goes. Because it does take. But I think if you look at comedians that you perceive as writing good jokes and their IQs, you will see a pretty good correlation. Now, but there's other things to being a comedian than writing good jokes. I can't do impressions very well. I do them okay, not amazingly. But impressions, I wouldn't imagine have anything to do with IQ. Sam Kinison, he used to scream. His jokes were good, but they were augmented by that scream. And that scream, I don't think is intelligence related. It's a performance. There's comedians who perform well, who can do it, not just impressions, but characters, can do act outs, we call it, where they act out a situation. But in terms of raw joke writing, I think you'll find a pretty clear correlation between comedians that are considered good joke writers and their IQs. Okay, that's it. That's all I have to say. Nick Griffin, if you have any comments.
Well, I had one question about how you would characterize ambition as opposed to intelligence. Is that a form of intelligence? These people who, because we all know of comics who are really, really good and they don't have the drive, that kind of pursuit of excellence that others do, that other lesser talented people have. I mean, where does that come from? Is that something you're kind of nurtured in early life, or to kind of be that way, or is that something that's just a part of you, that kind of ambition or pursuit?
In a way, you're asking about what it takes to be successful at something.
Yes, please help us.
And to be successful at something often requires a good amount of G, or a minimum amount of G, depending on what you want to be good at. The more complex the job, the more G matters, as you can imagine. You want to be a theoretical physicist, you need some G,
I would say for a comedian, 120 is more than enough. I would say probably 115 is all you really need, and then some good hustle.
That's probably correct, because those numbers might be true for just about any vocation you're talking about. But your question was about ambition, because in addition to G, if you just have G and no ambition and no personality and no ability to do anything with it, what you got is G, and you can sit home with your G and answer Jeopardy questions, and that is not a terrible thing. But if you want to go out into the world and be successful in real world things, you need things in addition to G, like ambition.
Now, by the way,
integrity.
You said something. You said something interesting there. Maybe it was just because you weren't careful with the thing off the top of your head, but you used Jeopardy. But Jeopardy to me is almost the best example of a pure memory task. So it's almost not. Is that a G task? Is Jeopardy is Jeopardy a good measure of general intelligence?
It is, because how much you know, how much you've learned, how much you've retained is part of the G factor. So people with high G know a lot of stuff, and how they know it is not so clear. They may have learned it back in high school and they just kind of remember it, but they remember it quickly. And remember, Jeopardy, the questions in Jeopardy, which are, your answer has to be in the form of a question, but the prompts in Jeopardy are a little verbally complex sometimes. It's not as straightforward, who is the King of England in 1415? it's more nuanced.
Okay. So some quick questions now. Sense of direction. This correlates to general intelligence?
I don't think so. I don't recall any studies. Sense of direction is interesting. It's sometimes called navigation ability. And I like all things like that, G can be a component, but I don't know that there's a strong relationship between the two.
Yeah, I
am
my sense-
so glad to hear you say that, because I have the worst sense of direction.
What a surprise. My sense of direction can get screwed up sometimes. You know, sometimes I think of my brain as like there's an engine, like a processor, which I consider, you know, to be pretty good. But certain pathways to that processor are not so good. And so like if I can get the inputs in a way that I can comprehend them into that processor, I will be very good at reading a map or whatever it is. But if this problem I have, like I sometimes reverse things, I'll sometimes reverse I'll look at a clock and I get 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock reversed, whatever it is, especially if I'm tired. And if I can't get past that, then garbage in, garbage out. Then even if then I can't bring my G to bear. And I feel like there are certain ways that certain things get into your brain, and some of it, and those can also be better and worse in people, and that can be another factor. That's just my own intuitive feeling of like really thinking about what I'm good at and what I'm not good at and where I fail. And I always feel like if I can get my mind around the basic variables of something, I can reason very, very well. But sometimes for some reason, like I just picture things, you know, reversed. Like I'll picture walking down a stair and it's hard for me to picture walking around the other way. And some days I can do it and some days I can't. And if I can do it, I can do everything right. Is there any theory that sounds like that?
I don't know any theory that would appeal for you. No, I'm afraid I don't. But I can make one up. I mean,
well, you heard it here first. How's that? You heard it here first. Let me ask you this: what is neuroplasticity? It sounds like something people rationalize. Is it really true?
Well, it's a general term that refers to the fact that the brain changes. When you learn something, your brain changes. Over time, as you mature and get older, your brain changes. So the brain is not a static organ. I don't know that your liver, for example, is plastic or your kidneys are plastic in the same sense that brain plasticity implies.
Right, but is there a tension between the idea that your IQ is fixed based on your genetics, but you can work on something and your brain changes?
Some people like to think so. They like to make that argument, but there's no real evidence for it. I mean, your IQ scores are pretty stable over the long periods of time, over decades. You know, let me just tell you, there was a really fascinating study in Scotland that started in the 1930s. Some researchers gave every single 11-year-old in Scotland, not a sample, all of them, every kid, tens of thousands, an IQ test on the same day when they're 11 years old. Okay, now, this was in the 1930s. Many of those people are still alive and they're still being studied. And
if they were 11 years old in 1930, very few are still alive, I would imagine.
I'll come back to that in a second, because their IQ score at age 11 predicts their mortality. I'm saying it now so you remind me to come back to it. The point that I wanted to make was when they take another IQ test in their 70s, the two are highly correlated. So there's a lot of stability from age 11 to age 75. Now, if you take all the kids at age 11 and you divide them now as adults into quartiles based on their IQ score at age 11, more people are alive at age 75 in the highest IQ quartile than in the lowest. It's true for men and for women. In men, about 50, about, I think it was about 50% of men in the highest IQ quartile are still alive at 75, compared to only 35% in the lowest quartile. And the numbers are similar in women. I think they're a little stronger in women, actually.
Is that because they
this,
just
by the
do
way, is in a country that has national health care. So everybody gets access to health care. And yet there's something about having a higher IQ over the long run that increases your odds of staying alive longer?
Well, I mean, things that come to mind would be fewer dumb accidents, and then being better informed on how to take care of yourself, and reading the newspapers on what's not healthy for you, and being able
all those
to
things have been
comprehend it.
studied. Yeah, all those things have been studied. It's not so clear. And there's some evidence that whatever the genes, we haven't really talked about the genetic aspects of intelligence and the G factor, but it could be that whatever the genes are that lead to higher IQ are also genes that lead to better health.
Is there a relationship
Wow.
between IQ and the onset of dementia? Do smarter people less likely to get dementia? I mean, in my personal experience, it doesn't seem to be the case, but I'm wondering if there's any literature on that.
There's a ton of literature on this. I mean, it's very interesting. It seems that higher IQ people, it takes longer to see the deterioration and get a diagnosis in higher IQ people. This is a concept called cognitive reserve. And the story that goes around to illustrate this, I'm not sure it's a true story, is that there was a mathematician who went to see his doctor and said, I used to be able to multiply two 4-digit numbers together in my head, but there's something wrong. I can now only multiply two 3-digit numbers together in my head. So multiplying two 3-digit numbers in your head is pretty hard.
There was a similar story about a guy that went to the doctor. And the doctor said, yeah, you're going to die in 10. And the guy says, 10 what? 9.
I think that's true. Well, I mean, listen, you get your 60s, you're supposed to slow down, but I noticed that the part of me which used to be able to generate an answer to an arithmetic problem, even a fairly complex one that was, touched on algebra in some way, it would just come to me. It would often just come to me, or come to me very, very quickly. That is not reliable anymore. I can still figure it out. I don't have any trouble figuring it out, but the part behind the curtain that I don't really have access to, which just expectorate the answer, whatever the word is, that is not reliable as it used to be. I like to think it's because I don't do math like I used to, whatever it is, but deep down I know that's not the reason.
I'm afraid to tell you that there's very clear research that after age 60, your mental speed really starts to decrease.
Yeah.
It really peaks in your 20s.
Yeah.
And this is why Jeopardy used to have a special tournament for seniors. It's not that they didn't know the answer, but their reaction times are just slower.
Well, I've noticed I'm not quite 60. I'm in my 50s, but I certainly don't think that my joke writing ability is less. And in fact, I think I'm writing better jokes. Maybe it's just because I'm better. I have more experience at it.
But you're not 60, Dan.
I understand that, but I'm not seeing any decline yet.
That's
I was
right.
talking about mental speed.
Now, thank God thank God writting good jokes isn't really that important anyway. Just got to keep it simple.
Go ahead.
There are different trajectories in different professions. Yeah. So some architects like Frank Lloyd Wright do some of their best work in their 80s and even 90s. Mathematicians, the really good mathematicians can peak in their 30s. So it depends on what kind of mental activities you're doing.
Now, two questions. What about alcohol? How bad is it for you?
I don't preach anything, but as I understand it, I don't know the research on this, but as I understand it, alcohol doesn't help the aging process.
Okay. And what about a loss of hearing? I have noise related hearing loss. I know there's correlations, but the causation is not determined. What's your feeling about that?
Nowadays, if you have hearing loss, I wear a hearing aid in each ear and have for a long time. If you have hearing loss and you don't have hearing aids, the hearing loss gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, I don't know what the research is on this, that if you don't hear well and you can't participate in conversations and social activities, that makes you more vulnerable to cognitive aging. So
phrenology, the idea that a bigger brain or a bigger head, I guess, it makes people smarter. I've read somewhere that there is a little bit of grain of truth to that.
There's more than a grain. The problem is you called it phrenology. Let's take the word phrenology out of it because that's something slightly different. But it is true that there is a very robust correlation of around 0.4 between brain size and IQ. And that's very reliable. It's been known for decades.
Yeah, but does somebody have a big head more likely to have a larger size brain?
If you have a bigger head, you'll have a bigger brain. But the head circumference is not a great measure of brain volume. But MRI scans, with the advent of MRI, the old criticisms of research that was based on head circumference and IQ, that's been supplanted by very sophisticated brain imaging. I used to do brain imaging research. So there definitely is something to bigger brains, smarter people. But I also add, some of my own research showed that the more efficient brains were related to higher IQ. So that it wasn't how hard your brain was working necessarily that was related to how smart you were, but how efficiently your brain was working. So we really haven't gotten into the actual interesting research. I just want to say one thing before you have to leave, because you asked me, can you improve IQ? And I said, the short answer was no. But this is where research is going, to increase the G factor. So I have said, and not all intelligence researchers agree with me, that the ultimate goal of all intelligence research is to be able to increase the G factor. We don't know how to do that by giving young children educational toys. Doesn't really seem to do much, or an enriched environment really doesn't seem to do much. It seems to be more with a genetic unfolding. So that if we want to think seriously about increasing intelligence, we have to understand the neurobiology underneath it on a real molecular biology level. We have to understand synapses, we have to understand neurotransmitters, and there is research now tying not just brain imaging and kind of a mega look, but also synapses and neurons, differences in neurons to intelligence. There's a big distance.
If I were to wake up tomorrow,
neuron and intelligence, but it's not an unknowable set of events between those things.
I were to wake up tomorrow, they figured out some way to enhance IQ or G biologically, and you gave me a pill, and I woke up tomorrow with a 180 IQ or much higher IQ. How quickly? How would I even? When would I notice? How might I first notice this? Would it probably take weeks before I even realize?
Well, your jokes might be better.
Or worse.
Worse.
You got to watch that. What's that movie with Ernest Borgnine?
Flowers
for Algernon. Yeah.
Charlie. Well, yeah, you're right about that. It's not clear which direction that might go, but you would notice a difference right away in how quickly you caught on to things.
Yeah.
You may become a better investor, for example, or something. I don't know, but there is a big difference. Having an IQ of 180. Let's say, well, what would it be like to see the world the way Einstein saw the world? I don't know if his IQ was 180, but it was pretty.
I suspect that do you know Tyler Cowan? I suspect his IQ is in there. Now listen, Dan, I'll answer your question a different way. Imagine Periel woke up with an IQ of 180. You think you notice the difference? So,
I was waiting for you to chime in with some comment like that. I thought you were gonna say my husband would dream to not be able to hear anything.
All right. Well, I guess I had one last question, but I can't.
Surprised Noam that you didn't ask about Noam's a musician, and I'm surprised he didn't ask if there's any relationship between musical ability and IQ, but he didn't.
Oh, I do know my last question. You can ask that because my wife's gonna kill me. I saw the movie Oppenheimer yesterday. I paid for everybody, and but you couldn't. It could be lost on no one that this is a story of what seemed to me Ashkenazi Jews. Just one after another, after another, after another, after another. A small portion of the world's population. Is that genetic? What is going on there?
There's a lot written about that, and people have been trying to understand what the actual genes might be, what the genes do. Genes play a role in intelligence, and the frequency of the so-called intelligence genes, and there are no genes for intelligence. I mean, genes make proteins, and there's a whole thing about proteins in the brain and brain chemistry and neurobiology. I mean, you start with down here in the brain and you wind up with theoretical physics. I mean, that's a long way to go. A lot has been written about why some people are smarter than others and whether some groups have different frequencies of the relevant genes.
Yeah, I don't want to get you into trouble because it's a very, very fraught issue. And I would say I'm open to a lot of things, but I read Charles Murray's last book, which was like Facing Reality, and I was actually quite turned off. I imagine he might be a friend of yours, and I could write you off line what I felt, but I was turned off by the direction that he went, and I thought that it was dangerous. But having said that, one can't help but observe certain things and wonder what the hell is going on there. I have to go, and I apologize because I'm on vacation and I have an event I have to attend, but I would invite you guys to go on for a few more minutes because, Mr. Hare, you're a fantastic resource here, and this is the most interesting of topics as far as I'm concerned. I think everybody is fascinated. Every parent is fascinated. Every person who questions their own ability and wonders what they're capable of and what they could be capable of is interested in this stuff. So if you guys have a few more questions, please go on. I don't know if you're in New York, Periel, if he is, or any way we can ever get to meet him in person, that would be wonderful. But very, very nice to meet you, sir, and I really appreciate it. And
well, likewise, and I'm sorry you're leaving because I'm just about to explain how you can become smarter. But these guys,
shit. Well, I'll listen to it. Okay, bye, guys.
Bye.
Were you kidding, Dr. Hire? Are you Dr. Hire?
I have a PhD, so you can call me Rich.
That's Dr. Hire as far as I'm concerned. But, were you about to tell us how to become more intelligent, or you were just
No, but I'm fascinated with you brought up the IQ pill, and I have given a lot of public lectures about IQ and intelligence, and I often ask the audience if there was a pill you could take with no side effects, and it would increase your IQ by a standard deviation, which is 15 points, which is a lot. Would you take the pill? And then I would ask, okay, while you're thinking about this, suppose I had two pills and you could only take one. One would increase your IQ, the other would increase your charisma. Which would you take?
We'll put that, Nick, you haven't spoken in a while. Let's let you answer that.
Charisma in a heartbeat. Yeah, definitely. And yeah.
Well, I'm a comedian, so I don't need those extra 15 points. That's not the determining factors I mentioned earlier in comedy. So I guess I would take the charisma. On the other hand, the 15 extra points, if I could become a better investor, maybe that would. I'm looking at the bottom line here. What's most likely to get me some cash? Because I don't think being more intelligent is going to make me happier.
I once gave.
So if it's not going to make me happier, at least I need some cash. If it's going to make me happier,
well, I guess that's That's really the question, though. I mean, there's that.
Now, ultimately, we were looking for
adage.
happiness. So 50, I don't think an extra 15 is going to make me happier.
Well,
Will it
what about this idea that being ignorance is bliss? I mean, is there any truth to that? Does being more intelligent lead to more problems because the more aware you are of how awful everything is, it's just more depressing?
Well, so let me ask you this, while we're thinking about answers to these questions, suppose you
Can
have
I
the
just take a pill and
opportunity-
just get $1 million cash in a briefcase?
Well, let me ask you, would you give your kid or your nephew or some child that you know, would you give them an IQ pill? Especially if the other
Wow,
kids in
that's a good
school-
question.
Especially if the other kids in school were taking one.
Well, it depends what he's starting off with. If he's just a dope, God bless him, I'd give him the pill. If he's already working with, if he's working with 130, 125, I'd probably leave it at that. I mean, is there a correlation? Again, the bottom line is human happiness. That's kind of what we're all after. And is there reason to believe that he'll be happier with that extra 15 points? If, say, he's already got 125, 130, or even 120, you know.
Yeah.
What
Whatever the relationship is between intelligence and happiness, it's not so strong that you could predict for any individual whether more IQ would make them more or less happy. Because you're right, more IQ, more opportunities, more problems, more anxiety. You know, it's a mixed. It's mixed. I will tell you when
So what do most people say when you ask that question? What do they pick?
In a audience of academics, and I once gave this talk in a room full of theoretical physicists, all hands want more IQ.
Wow.
Instant.
Is it just an
They
ego
want
thing?
more
Or?
intelligence. When I talk to the public, more hands go up for charisma.
Wow, that makes sense.
But again, we talk specifically to comedians, and you know, I think Nick and our joke writing ability is as good as it needs to be, and so I don't think there's much marginal benefit for more IQ. So we pick.
No, you guys
I wanna
need to
see-
work on your social media, not on your joke writing.
Okay, so I don't know if that would be charisma or just work ethic or what that would be. But on the other hand, as I said before, if that higher IQ could make me a better investor, or perhaps a better writer in terms of books and scripts, you know, outside of pure stand-up, maybe that would be of benefit.
I would be interested to know, you don't have to name names, but I would be interested to know, of all the comedians and joke writers you know, do you think the best ones are also the smartest?
Well, I think the best joke writers are the smartest, as I was saying earlier, but there's more to being a great comedian than just writing a good joke.
Well, of course, yeah.
You know, so there's performance ability that, you know,
Also, it's like I don't know if they're the best, but my favorite types are more joke writer types. But I can appreciate, you know, guy with a lot of or female with a lot of charisma. It just it feels like they're in the same, you know, we're in the same kind of lane when you're, you know, talking about joke writing. You know, I always keep my eye out.
Well, you know, some comics also just have more interesting stories. John Mulaney did a special. Now, I'm sure he's very intelligent, but he also happens to be a drug addict. And he talked about that, and he talked about rehab, and that was just engaging because of what he lived through, which has nothing to do with his intelligence. We're talking about Keith Robinson, who had a stroke, and it's fascinating to hear him on stage dealing with that. So that's another factor. There's the joke writing, the performance, and the stories that the life you've lived. The life you've lived is a factor in terms of how good a comedian you are. So those non-G related factors, you know, are relevant. But in terms of pure joke writing, yes, I think there's a correlation with intelligence. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that. Is there, we know that an IQ can get you further in your career. Is there an intrinsic happiness that people have that are more intelligent? irrespective of income, just is being intelligent in and of itself, does that make you happy?
It's not so clear. There's another, I talked about the study in Scotland. There's another longitudinal study that started at Johns Hopkins in the 1970s when I was a graduate student there. And it was on mathematically precocious kids. And they gave a bunch of 12-year-olds the SAT math test. And they identified a bunch of 12-year-olds who scored as high on the SAT math as freshmen at Hopkins. Well, these were pretty precocious. It's a long story, but essentially they have just done a 50-year follow-up of those kids. All right.
Wow.
So this is now based on one test score at age 12 on SAT math.
In 1970.
In 1970.
Okay, so those kids
Really
they're in their 60s, these kids.
Yeah. And so they've had, some of them are a little older, they've had careers, and many of them have done quite well, and as you would expect. And a lot of them, they all have the same vicissitudes of life as everybody, the same difficulties, but they tend to be happy in their work, in their lives, whether that's due to their intelligence or their general success. Hard to know. So it's hard to answer that question.
There's a funny episode of The Simpsons where Homer gets a crayon stuck in his nose. Or no, he has a crayon stuck in his nose. Like, they find out the only reason he's so dumb is because of this crayon. So they take it out. And then now he's really intelligent, and he's sitting through a movie and everybody's howling. and he's like, this is dumb and stupid. And he says, I want the crayon back.
How did I miss that episode?
Well, Google.
How did I miss that episode?
It's easy to find, Yeah,
I will have to watch that.
So, there is that. On the other hand, sometimes I do get certain satisfaction, in intellectual pursuits. I don't know overall,
Yeah, I don't get. I mean, I just feel like the older I get, the more thinking doesn't really help my day-to-day kind of mental
well-being.
balance. Yeah, mental well-being. Perfect. I just.
Well, let me ask you this: if you could give up 15 IQ points, but you knew that you would suffer at.
That's an interesting
Be
question.
happier.
I've asked
Would you
myself,
do it?
would I be dumb? But if you told me I'd be dumb, but I'd be happy. And the logical answer is, of course, you should
Or happier.
Yes.
Happier.
As soon
Not
as
necessarily
you make,
happy,
as
but
soon as you make
happier.
the deal, whatever it is, as soon as you make the deal, you'll be glad you did, because you'll be happier. And yet I don't think.
Well, or you're a moron.
What I'm saying is if you said to me, I'll make you dumb but happy, I wouldn't take the deal, but I should. Logic dictates that, of course, I should do that.
So I'm going to modify my talks now. I'm going to ask, IQ pill to make you smarter, charisma, or IQ pill that makes you dumber.
Right.
But
But the crayon in the nose.
Yeah, or the dumber.
We could do an experiment. Look, we could do an experiment on this. All you have to do is stop doing what you're doing for a month and watch certain TV channels that are kind of mindless for your entertainment. Just, binge on something that's kind of fluffy and
The Bachelor, The Bachelor,
value at all.
The Bachelor.
Something like that.
Yeah.
See if you feel better after a month.
No, it sounds awful. It sounds like turning your brain into garbage.
Well, I've enjoyed The Bachelor on occasion.
I have not.
I went to a friend of mine's house.
I have not watched it.
Went to a friend of mine's house, and she put on The Bachelor. I said, "What is this? Fuck! I'm not gonna watch this shit." And then 30 minutes later, I'm transfixed. So anyway, I think that's.
Now you see, I feel the same way about watching Nova.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know what Nova is.
Yeah, we know.
I remember Nova. Is that still on the air?
I think it's on Netflix now.
Okay, could be. It could be. By the way, I will end. I do want to say that I read A Brief History of Time years ago, which is supposed to be a layman's guide to theoretical physics, and couldn't understand a word of it.
Hilarious.
So there's the point is there's no easy way to explain the origins of the universe. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway,
I had the same experience with that book, by the way.
Yeah.
And everyone I know who bought the book says the same thing. It's not a simple book. It's just not.
It's as simple as perhaps as it could be. But
Well, I think that's probably true, because I mean the concepts are so mind-bending that it's really hard to get your head around.
And maybe for a guy like Hawking, who wrote the book, he thought, oh, any moron can understand this book, because to him, maybe he dumbed it down to a level that for him seems so easy, not realizing that dumb for him is beyond everybody else's, comprehension. Anyway, he paid a, I'm sure he would have preferred to be dumber and able-bodied if you gave him that pill, but who knows? He's not around to ask that question, but
maybe not.
Maybe.
Well, I did see the Simpsons episode that featured him.
I did not. See.
Oh yeah, that's right. There was a Simpsons episode where he was.
Yeah, there was.
Where like all these smart people were like, bragging about being smart, and then he kind of walks in his wheelchair and says, "Now you're all idiots." Anyway.
Okay, let's say, Rich, where can people find you and your work?
My website is richardheyer.com. They can Google me, get a bunch of links. They can go on Amazon. I have a couple of books on intelligence that are really written as introductory books, no jargon, pretty clear language, talk about the G factor, talk about brain imaging, talk about genetics, a lot more than we got into today, but I'm easy to find on the web.
Yeah, I think your book is the Neuroscience of Intelligence is one of your books.
It is. Second edition just came out. The other book that just came out is called The Science of Human Intelligence. And the science of human intelligence talks about aging, talks about sex differences, talks about national differences. The neuroscience of intelligence focuses on genetics and brain imaging.
Okay, so the Neuroscience of Intelligence, if you're interested in genetics and brain images, if you're looking for lighter fare, Periel Aschenbrand wrote a book called On My Knees, and that is available on Amazon as well. And I have now, Dr. Heyer, you can imagine that On My Knees, I don't have to spell it out for you. That's a book about a young lady's sexual awakening.
Not really.
Oh, no.
Have you read it yet? You
I
still
have
haven't even read it.
Done so.
He's reading it the night he watches Gary Goldman's special.
Exactly. And Nick Griffin has a new special out on YouTube called
Absolutely Wonderful.
Absolutely Wonderful. From one of the better joke writers that we have here at the Comedy Cellar.
Thank you.
Yes. And I guess that's it. Podcast at comedycellar.com for comments, questions, and suggestions. Thank you, Nicole Lyons, our sound wizard. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.